Kids, how's it going? Great to hear. Today's talk is God's in control, not us. So, if God's in control, what does that mean? Does he save us from bad things? He could do that, but he functions differently. He, at times, puts us in difficult situations for our benefit. Okay, why? He wants to teach us to rely on him and not just on our choices. That image there is of a king, whom I'll talk about soon. Before we start, I'll give you an example. Do you know about Warner Brothers Movie World? Some of you, maybe? 20 years ago, when I was in primary school, about your age, Mum, Dad and I went to the Gold Coast for a holiday and we went to Warner Brothers Movie World. There was a ride called the Batman Adventure Ride. I thought, this sounds like great fun. Little did I know what would happen next. We were with a group of people in a dark room. I sat down with Mum and Dad either side. We put on our seatbelts and watched the large screen in front of us. Suddenly, this room was tilting and shaking in every direction as we followed Batman flying through the Batcave.
Initiate launch sequence. Max.
Stand by.
Go one.
Ready to launch.
Go two.
Batman, trouble at the power plant.
One and three. Scout the north end. Two. Follow me.
I was very scared, saying, "Help me!" Mum and Dad didn't expect it either. Mum almost lost her handbag as it slid across the floor. Anyway, even though I wasn't in control of this ride, someone else was, and in the end, we returned to the Batcave safely. In today's story, there's a king who thinks he's in control of a situation, but it's really God working behind the scenes. Last week, we learned how people can puff themselves up to feel more important than others. King Nebuchadnezzar had stolen the silver cups from God's temple in Jerusalem. Belshazzar, his grandson, wanted to boast about how great his rule was. So Belshazzar ordered the cups to be brought in for his feast. During the feast, he sees a hand writing 4 words on the wall, and his enchanters can't explain it, except Daniel. He, with God's help, explains the writing. Your rule will end, King Belshazzar, and your kingdom will fall. Belshazzar, in reward, puts Daniel as third in charge of his kingdom. Later that night, Belshazzar is killed. In Daniel 6, we meet the next king, Darius. He ruled from 550 to 486 BC. BC means before Christ. He planned to put Daniel above all the other advisors, because Darius saw an excellent spirit in Daniel. You'll notice that Darius holds a gold staff, not a COVID stick. That's called a scepter. In those days, king's scepters were a symbol to represent their power and authority. However, the other advisors weren't happy about this at all. They were very jealous of Daniel. They said secretly to each other, "We cannot find any fault against Daniel because he's loyal, faithful, honest, and the king plans to put him in charge of everything. What can we do to stop the king?" Maybe we can find a fault against Daniel's God. You might be thinking, why is there a map there? Good question, I'll explain that. After the Babylonian rule, there were 2 groups of people, the Medes and the Persians. They had a specific type of law, which once it was made, no one could change it, not even the king. It's like doing a school test within a time limit, and once the time's ended, you can't change any of your answers. So, the advisors said to Darius, "O King Darius, live forever! We think you should make a law according to the Medes and Persians' law that no one will worship any other god but you for 30 days. If they do worship another god, they must be thrown into the lion's den. The king agreed to this law, but he didn't know it was a trap for Daniel. The advisors saw Daniel praying to Yahweh in the upper room of his house. Daniel continued to pray to God despite Darius's law. The advisors reported back to the king. Remember that law you made, King Darius? We saw Daniel praying to his God instead of you. He must be thrown into the lion's den. Darius was upset. He liked Daniel very much, but he couldn't change this law he made. He had to follow it. Darius ordered his men to arrest Daniel, and then Darius said to him, "May your God, whom you continually serve, save you from the lions." Darius's men put Daniel into the lion's den, and the stone was laid on top with Darius's seal. Darius was very upset about Daniel and how his top advisors tricked him and condemned Daniel. He couldn't eat, sleep, or drink that night. So he got up early the next morning at dawn and hurried to see if Daniel was still alive. Darius called out to Daniel, "Was the living God whom you serve able to save you?" A voice replied, "King Darius, live forever! My God sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions. I am not harmed." Extremely glad, Darius ordered his men to pull Daniel out of the den immediately, but Darius ordered the other advisors to be put in instead. Darius then made a new law. Darius said, "To every person and nation, from now on, everyone will worship the living God of Daniel, who has saved him from the lions and whose rule will last forever." You see how God turned the situation around? Who was in control of the situation? Was it Darius or God? God. Darius, the all-powerful king, was tricked by his advisors and became powerless to save Daniel, his most trusted servant. So, Darius needed to rely on Daniel's God. This was all part of God's plan. He wanted Darius to see that it was the living God who controlled these events, not Darius. And kids, all of us forget as well, and we need to be reminded of this, including myself, that even though we are, at times, put in difficult situations like COVID, it's God who's in control, not us. Let's pray. Dear Father, it is very hard for us to trust you at times, especially when we can't control them. But I thank you, Father, that you help us to rely on you rather than us, especially in difficult situations. And I pray these things in your Son's name. Amen. Thanks, kids.